Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to a comparison I've been waiting to do for quite some time. We're currently sitting in a 2024 Acura Integra Type S, and we'll be comparing it against a 2018 BMW F87 M2. I own a 2024 Integra Type S as well, but I wanted to take this opportunity to review this relatively mildly modified example against a more modified base M2. And the reason I'm so curious about this comparison is because I sort of cross-shopped these two cars before I bought my Type S back in 2023. Although technically I was more interested in the F87 M2 competition, base M2 was also interesting because you could get that for, on average, $10,000 less than the comp. So if you throw that money into mods, between these two cars for sub $50,000, which one is the better all-around daily drivable sporty car that can also be taken to the racetrack? The way I've modified my own Type S with the Öhlins and the wheels and the Cobb Stage 1 tune, it's all about maintaining streetability while also being able to keep up with much more expensive cars on the track. And I feel like I've accomplished that. And Alan, the owner of this one, has taken a somewhat similar approach in keeping this car very streetable. So we'll put the full list of mods in the video description, but some of the highlights include spoon rigid collars, H&R lowering springs. We still have the stock adaptive dampers, Whiteline rear camber arms and rear sway bar, Hawk HPS 2.0 brake pads, these beautiful Volk CE28N Plus 18-inch wheels in matte blue with Falken RT 660s, and we got some bolt-ons as well, a spoon drop-in filter, a Milltek resonated catback exhaust, and a Hondata Jailbreak with a TSP Stage 1 map. And for the interior, we have this FL5 Type R shift knob with a hybrid short shifter. I'll get into the M2 mods a bit later, but that one definitely has quite a bit more done in terms of suspension and aero. So this car is powered by the K20C8 engine. It's a 2-liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder, making 320 horsepower stock, 310 pound-feet. Alan mentioned that this car with the tune should be making close to 340 at the wheels. Strut front, multi-link rear suspension. And so the way this tune works is if you use the cruise control up and down buttons, if you hold it up, see it goes to 2, which is the exact map that we want to use. You can also put it into 3, but we'll go 2 just so we can limit the torque in first and second. Right away, this hybrid short shifter feels pretty good. Doesn't feel too different from my Acuity short shifter. Let's roll the windows down a little bit, hear this Milltek. Okay, a little bit of wheel spin, but not too bad. Woo. Oh yeah, the mid-range punch of this engine is noticeably improved. Wow, this is such a surprisingly fast car in terms of the straight line performance. Even a stock Integra Type S caught me off guard the first time I floored it. And it puts the power down so well for being front wheel drive. There is some torque steer, and you feel it even more now with the tune and the bolt-ons, but it's manageable. You just have to correct it a little bit with your steering input. So much grip, so much confidence. We have the stock adaptive dampers in the sport damping setting, which is perfectly suited for this road. With the H&R lowering springs, ride comfort is slightly compromised, but in comfort mode, this car still rides quite well. Let's actually try putting it into the stiffest Sport Plus suspension setting. I just love how hard I can attack these corners with this car. The front end responds so well on turn-in. You wouldn't believe that that engine is hanging out in front of the front axle. Honda and Acura really have done something special here. The engine, even with the exhaust and the bolt-ons, doesn't make the best sound. It is a turbocharged 4-cylinder after all, doesn't have a whole lot of character, but in terms of the way it pulls hard to the red line, 7,000 RPM. There is a little bit of lag down low, even with the tune, but once you get it above about 3,500, the response is actually quite good. Be curious what kind of lap times this car with this setup can do. Slightly stickier tires than my V730s, slightly more power, doesn't have the Öhlins road and track coilovers. Might be close. Oh, such a good car. The best front wheel drive car on sale today. Between this and the Type R, of course, because they're virtually the same. So capable in terms of performance. Just really easy to live with on a daily basis. With just some basic mods, this Milltek resonated exhaust, which you can throw into comfort mode, which closes the valve. It's so well-rounded. And ultimately, that's why I bought mine. Even though the internet, and I was guilty of this too, at the time thought it was overpriced. At $51,000 to $52,000, I think. In 2025, the MSRP is up to $53,000. But end of the day, what other car brand new can do what this car does? With Type R still commanding markups at most dealerships, the Type S starts to make a lot more sense. The Elantra N is a great option, a great cheaper alternative, but it's not as capable, as refined, as quick as the Type R and Type S. And even if you expand to rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive options, nothing really comes close to this. GR Corolla, better in all-weather conditions, but doesn't have the performance on track or the sharpness. And so that's why, to make this comparison interesting, I have to turn to slightly used cars. The F87 M2 and M2 competition. Those were the cars I was really cross-shopping against. I was actually waiting for a clean used M2 competition 6-speed to show up for sale. It never did. Although there were some base M2s at that time, I just thought I wanted the S55 engine. Was that the right choice? That's what we're gonna find out. And then you just back it off into comfort mode. I love how easy Honda's and Acura's infotainment systems are. Dead simple to use. Everything's just a couple of clicks away. You don't have to dive deep into menus to do basic things. Look at that. The exhaust quiets down, the suspension softens up, and we have a perfectly livable daily driver with plenty of space for 4 and a cavernous hatch. It's really hard to argue with. Time to see if I should have gotten an F87 M2 and gone ham with mods. All right, we're now in the 2018 BMW F87 generation M2. This one, as you can probably already tell, is quite a bit more modified, but I would say the difference in price between mods between these two cars should more or less make up the difference between the overall cost to purchase the car. Full list in the video description, but we've got a pure Stage 2 turbo, a 5150 racing tune. Those two things together give us about 400 or 450 wheel horsepower. Keep in mind the stock engine, the N55, is a 3-liter single turbo inline 6, making 365 horsepower and 343 pound-feet at the crank. So this has got to be at least 100 to 150 horsepower more than stock. We've also got very high-end suspension, MCS two-way non-remote coilovers. The spring rates are 7K front, 14K rear, entire SPL front catalog to make the handling and the front end response as sharp as possible. We've also got some gyro disc rotors with Ferodo DS 1.11 pads in the front, DS 2500s in the rear. Obviously, the interior is quite modified. We have this Mad Trace steering wheel. It's a Momo wheel, but we've got the Mad Trace buttons. Insane looking for a street car. We've also got an Auto Solutions short shift kit, Rogue Engineering transmission mounts, and then these Recaro pole position seats. I'm sure the car has more than this, but these are just the highlights according to the owner, Alex. We've got strut front suspension, multi-link rear. This car should weigh a little over 3,400 pounds. I think with the mods, it might be in the 3,300s. That Type S, though, should only weigh about 3,200 pounds. Well, right away, it's quite loud in here. Sport Plus mode, and the only way to disable auto rev match is to hold the DSC button for about 5 seconds, turn it fully off. Let's go into the sport displays. Obviously, the interior tech is quite a bit less advanced than the Integra, being a 6-year older car, but still relatively refined. It's a BMW after all. Decent interior build quality. The screen's a bit on the smaller side. We'll start in second gear. I didn't know an N55 could sound that good. Wow. Right away, this engine makes so much torque. The mid-range push is even more impressive than the Type S's. Redline's only about 7,000. Similar to the Type S, but this engine does make a better sound. It's a straight 6. It has that BMW smoothness combined with the whooshes and whistles of the turbo. It has incredible front-end response. Even though it's heavier than the Type S, the MCS coilovers combined with the SPL front catalog, it does wonders for this car's front-end response and confidence. I've driven a stock F87 M2 and it was this floaty, vague thing. The front just felt unsettled and the rear even more so. Not the case here. Wow, this engine just pulls so linearly. For an EPS is pretty good. It has more feedback than a stock M2 for sure, but mostly it's just the response, the way the front end of this car responds to my inputs. It's so much more immediate and less vague. But compared to that Type S, the difference isn't as huge compared to a stock M2 versus this M2. I think the Type S's front-end response sits somewhere in between. Now, ergonomically is where I have a bit of a challenge with this particular car setup. Look at this. This bucket seat means I have to T-Rex the shifter. Lots of mid-corner grip. Hankook RS4 tires, but this car actually rides surprisingly well with the MCS coilovers. It is going to be stiffer than the Type S, but the damping feels so top-notch. Every bump, you feel it, but it doesn't bounce. There's no extra vertical motion. The suspension just settles so quickly. That's the telltale sign of a high-end damper. Feel really good too. Just pads and fluid and some upgraded rotor is all you need. Wow, I love the way this car responds to my inputs. Although I am sensing a little bit of incongruence here in terms of the front end response is so good and just the overall handling of the car is so immediate, but then the engine does have some lag. It's not the most responsive thing in the world. You do have to wait on it coming out of corners sometimes. I think this exact car with an S65 naturally aspirated V8 swap would be just money. Mid-corner grip and stability for days though. Oh, just the way this car handles the bumps, even in the high-speed bends, pure stability. The Integra struggles a bit there, because of its more basic suspension mods, just H&R lowering springs with stock adaptive dampers. Perfectly fine. They're not sketchy at all. In fact, one of the better lowering spring only setups I've felt, but not on this level. But back to the original question. Do I think I should have gotten one of these instead? You know, as much as I love the way this car drives, at the end of the day, for my use case, it's a little bit too hardcore. But as it stands, I think the Integra Type S is still just such a well-rounded car, as long as you're not anti-front wheel drive. As I've gotten more accustomed with front wheel drive cars, I don't think the fact that you can't power oversteer it is such a deal breaker anymore. But that being said, no question in my mind, this is the more enjoyable car to drive quickly. But at the same price with mods, I think I'd still take the Integra Type S, again, for my use case. But as a dedicated track car, the M2 makes a lot more sense. I'm curious now if there's a happy medium in terms of modding an F87. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Which would you have? Which do you think is the better dual duty car? A big shout out to Alex and to Alan. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.